What's going on, guys? Jamin back again, giving you another episode on The Walking Dead Season 7, Episode 5, Go Getters. This episode, there's an emphasis on two storylines, one with Carl and Enid gradually making their way to the hilltop, and the other focusing on Maggie and Sasha recuperating after the demise of two beloved characters. So let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to explain the plot and everything that happens in the exposition of everything that happens in the episode, context, and then I'll give you my verdict. This is probably going to be a new style of me recording. I realize that I'm just explaining the plot and, a few details, my thoughts, my perception of things, but I want to give it a roundabout, full thoughts on the episode. So stay tuned for that. So in the episode, we see that Maggie is doing just fine with the baby. It turns out that there was some separation between the uterus and some other part of the female anatomy. But yeah, she's doing just fine, and yeah, I think it's going great. But the doctor says that she needs to relax and lay down, not get up and move so often because it will exacerbate the pain. So that's happening. Sasha's there, and really this episode is just composed of, one of the chronic problems of the Walking Dead this season and many other seasons so far is that it chronologically focuses on one episode in one specific area, and that could create a monotonous pacing. And something I just want to point out as a reference point, as an analogy, is that Game of Thrones, it mixes its areas where it's shooting. It will shoot at a different area, or different episodes. It's just not one chronological, linear, sequential episode, just like with Alexandria, the Hilltop, the Kingdom one episode. They mix it up variations so that way to keep the audience's interest going. We find out rather quickly that Gregory is not accepting the fact that Maggie is there, and we notice how much of a faint-hearted leader Gregory is. I mean, even before the Saviors come in to oppress communities and colonies, he's just really faint-hearted in general, and it's really points out what kind of a feckless leader Gregory is. And he's rather callous as well, telling Maggie, you need to leave, regardless if she's pregnant or not. She won't tolerate her being there, and Gregory tries to put up this facade about plausible deniability, that we need to keep them out of the shadows, so that way we keep in, good respects and regards with the Saviors. So, really the highlight of this episode is Simon getting to the hilltop and meeting up with Gregory and seeing how compliant Gregory is with everything, and he's just kind of really submissive and scared, fearful of whatever Simon's going to do. And basically Simon tells him that, do you have anything else to tell me? Anybody else that's here? Kind of like he's suspecting that two people from Alexandria are there. And he says, yeah. And he goes to the closet where, some context here, just to preface this, is that he told Jesus to put Maggie and Sasha in the closet. So therefore he would go and open the closet, and they would be there, and they would take them away to try to lift the burden off of the hilltop, so to speak. But, Jesus being such a benevolent person, he betrayed his trust, rightfully so. So he hid them somewhere else, and they opened it, and they just took all of his alcohol. And, Gregory being a bit of a connoisseur of alcohol and, fanatic with that. He drinks too much alcohol, if you ask me, because he's making terrible judgments. But, and they basically take all his alcohol and they leave. By the end of the episode, we see that, Gregory, by the end of the episode, we see that Jesus sneaks into the back of the truck of one of the fleeting Savior's trucks, and we see that Carl's inside. And this is mirroring the iconography for issue 104 of The Walking Dead, where Carl's in the back with the M16, although Carl doesn't have the M16. I would prefer if he did, but they took all their weapons. But it's going to be interesting how we see that plot, that storyline take place. Now, I'm going to give you all my overall verdict. I think this is one of the great shortcomings of The Walking Dead. Very reminiscent of the season, the episode last year where we saw the first introduction prologue with the the Alexandrians meeting the Hilltop members and Jesus. I think it's that way because, first of all, there are way too many plot holes with Enid, and also the monotonous pacing. The commercials, the way they are, although there are 15 minutes commercials, it feels like it goes by so quickly. They prolong scenes that don't really need to be prolonged, and they need to be abridged, in my opinion. There's one scene where Enid and Carl are making their way to, Enid's making her way to the hilltop, and she sees a walker, and the scene gets intense, and she becomes frightened and distressed from seeing the walker all of a sudden. And I think that was a bit of a logical inconsistency with her character, because why all of a sudden would she be afraid of a walker? And it's kind of ominous, and then Carl comes and hits the walker with his car that he's driving, and kills the walker. And there's a raid where Simon and the Saviors, they basically try to make a point, and they bring a car into the hilltop and make it play Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which is kind of a coincidence, and because it seems like there's been a consistency with the Saviors being obsessed with Beethoven. I guess they like classical music, because Negan, when he went to the Alexandria community for the first time, he was humming Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. So they did that to make a point that to not go into cahoots or collaborate with other communities and make economic decisions. So they did that, and then Sasha's explaining something through the window, although us as the audience sees visually what's happening. So it just kind of seemed pointless, and but yeah, I really think that the Carl and Enid's relationship seems rather worthless, and I don't see a lot of chemistry between them two. I really think that the split between two storylines there in this episode was rather in vain. I don't think that The Walking Dead needs to be bother themselves with such non-regular characters, I guess. It just doesn't hold up with half of the episode containing scenes with Enid and Carl. But yeah, those scenes should have definitely been cut, and I wish we got more screen time of just Hilltop, I guess. But Jesus in the show doesn't seem as interesting as he is in the comics. He's more cunning and sneaky, conniving, getting his way around. And I guess that what makes him interesting is because he's not as in many panels as the comics as he in the show. He's heavily featured in the show, but he's more interesting because he can get his way around places and not heavy dialogue character. But I think one of the redeemable qualities about this episode is that we get to see Simon, and Simon is a pretty malevolent. He managed. I don't know, like the way he emotes physically as an actor. Yeah, Stephen Hawke. He just manages to convey like a lot of, inject a lot of malice into his character. Like he just makes me fearful of what will happen next. And he's almost up there with Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Negan, because they are just top two contenders for being fearful antagonists. Probably that was maybe one of the saving graces of this episode, but other than that, I think this episode is one of the shortcomings, along with the last season, when they go to the hilltop for this first time, and many other seasons before, where I think one of the worst episodes of the series was Daryl and Beth going to find alcohol, and that was the plot for the entire episode. And wow, it was definitely sentimentalized a lot, the emotion in that episode. But yeah, that's all I have to say. I'm gonna give this episode a 4.5 out of 10 stars. Kind of disappointing. We did get a lot of very great episodes so far, though. First 4 episodes have been fantastic, and yeah, it's going very well with the story arc. I cannot wait to see what will happen in the future with Carl and Jesus in the back of that truck, and when they get to the sanctuary, and we will see what happens. See you guys next week for a bottle episode.